Okay, so welcome everyone, and we can carry on where we left off last time, which I think is back in April or something. Yeah. So every 6 months you get a new installment of this very long sutta. It would have been nice if it was a bit more frequent, but this is the way it goes. I just did the sutta at the monastery over the Rains retreat, and we did 10 sessions or something like that, and that was only a small part of the sutta. So this sutta can be expanded out to the whole Buddhist path, and that is because it is what is often called the Pubbā Sikka. Pubbā Sikka means like gradual training. Sikka is training in Pali. Pubbā is like prior, so it's like training with the prior, in other words, like sequential or something like that. So it's like the gradual training in Pali. And because of that, it really contains all the elements of the Buddhist teachings, the whole path from the beginning, from the moment you hear the word of the Buddha until you become enlightened. So one of the nice things about that is that you can sort of see where you are at, where your meditation is at, and get some idea what it is that you have to do, because it sets out this whole beautiful path, every aspect of it. And of course, as we kind of move forward on this path, we get into meditation or whatever, we're still working on the early aspects at the same time. So this whole path becomes like integrated. The more advanced you are on this path, the more all the factors come together in your practice. And so this is very very inspiring when you see this. This is how you can recognize someone who's practicing well, doing the right thing. But this particular sutta, just to remind you, is there anyone who has no idea about this particular sutta, who's here for the first time, kind of thing? Yeah, okay, welcome, good. So you're coming into the middle of a particular discourse. The Buddha, don't worry, it's fine. You don't have to hear, whether you missed out the early part, it's actually quite irrelevant. You will still get what's going on. But just to give you a little bit of background, this is the second discourse in what is known as the long discourses of the Buddha, the Digha Nikaya. Digha in Pali means long, Nikaya means collection, a long collection of discourses, second discourse. And it is a very well-known discourse, one of the longest discourses that we find among the suttas, the word of the Buddha. And one of the nice things about this discourse is that the narrative around it is about this king in ancient India called Ajātasattu. Ajātasattu means the unborn enemy. It's an interesting name, isn't it? His name was literally the unborn enemy. It's kind of a scary name. I don't know if it was the father who gave him that name, or that became his later kind of appellation or whatever. I'm not sure. It's a bit strange for the parents to give that name to a son, unborn enemy. Anyway. And he was torn with remorse because he had killed his own father. So he literally was the unborn enemy. So quite likely, he got that appellation later on because of his conduct afterwards, Ajātasattu. And he was torn with remorse, and he asks his ministers, who can I see in the world? Who are the Brahmins or the spiritual practitioners who might be able to ease my conscience? Because I can't really sleep properly, all of these kind of things. When you do something really bad in the world, it really destroys your mental tranquility. And this straight away shows you the importance of virtue and kindness and morality on the Buddhist path. It allows you some degree of peace, etc., etc. So, and then we have this discussion between the various ministers, and then the last minister says, well, go and see the Buddha, because the Buddha he's a cool guy. Cool in the higher sense of cool is really, really cool. Cool is actually a word for someone who's enlightened, so that's why I'm using that word, not just to kind of sound contemporary or whatever. Sitibutto means become cool. And so he decides to go and see the Buddha. And then there's a long conversation about the doctrines of the various Brahmins and ascetics and spiritual teachers in ancient India, and we see the shortcomings of those teachings. And then the king asks the Buddha, can you teach me about the fruits of the spiritual life? The results. What is the purpose of the spiritual life? So this sutta is really about the fruits of the spiritual life. That's very interesting, right? I mean, it's really, really, this is absolutely what this is about. That's why every one of us is here, because of the fruits of the spiritual life. This coming down to really the critical essence of what this path is about. And this is why it's so interesting. But instead of just giving us the fruits and kind of listing the fruits, we'll come to those later on, the Buddha, as part of his explanation, he gives this long, the whole course of practice that leads up to those fruits and those results on the path. And so far, in the first 3 sessions, we have looked a little bit at how a Buddha arises in the world, how a Buddha comes to be, and then you get people listening to that teaching, and they decide to go forth to become a monastic. And then once they have gone forth, you can see here this whole section, about, and this kind of gives the, this whole section gives the path in brief, basically. Once they have gone forth, you are restrained by the monastic code. This is like morality. You conduct themselves well, seeking alms in a suitable place, good conduct, hanging out in the right places, seeing danger in the slightest fault, in other words, being scrupulous in your morality, keeping the rules you have undertaken, acting skillfully by body and speech. All of this is about morality, really. Purified in livelihood. It means that you just walk for alms and you don't do all this dodgy stuff. And then you are accomplished in ethical conduct. Then you have guarding the doors of the senses, having mindfulness and situational awareness, and they are content. And this is the beginning of this gradual training here. And I'm going to look now at each of these sections, each of these things in much greater detail. So let us see what we can do. All right. Okay, I think we better keep the full screen, otherwise we get all this kind of disturbing stuff in the background. Okay. All right, we'll just leave it like that. I don't like so much text on the screen. I find it kind of disturbing. I like one word at the most on the screen. That's kind of my ideal. But anyway, because we're going slowly, we don't want to see too many words. Okay. So now we come to the section on ethical conduct, and we're going to look at ethics in a little bit of, not too much detail, because we talked about ethics a lot previously, but we're going to have a look at a little bit of detail of the idea of ethics. In other words, morality. In other words, many aspects of this idea of ethics in Buddhism. And I would say that of the many kind of beautiful parts of the Buddhist teachings, the idea of Buddhist ethics is maybe one of the many very interesting parts of Buddhism, because it is quite unique in the world, the way that morality and ethics is presented in the Buddhist teachings. And this is one of the things we will see as we go through this. And when I say it is unique, is this for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons it is unique is that the Buddhism, the compass of ethics is very broad. So we're talking about ethics of bodily conduct, how we treat other people in the world. We talk about the ethics of speech, but we also talk about the ethics of mind. The mental conduct is an important part of Buddhist ethics. And so what that means is that ethics in Buddhism is basically about our entire personality, how we are in the world. If you take body, speech and mind, it's pretty much who we are. So it is about our habits, our personality, how we express ourselves in the world, and also even privately in our own thoughts. So it's very broad, and that makes it much more complete than any other kind of system of ethics normally. That is one thing that is interesting about Buddhist ethics. Another aspect of Buddhist ethics that we will see shortly is that not only is it about not doing things. Most systems of ethics around the world are about avoiding doing certain things. Don't do that, don't do this. But Buddhist morality, Buddhist ethics is also about what we should do, about the positive side of ethics. Yeah, don't do this, do this instead. This is what you should be doing. Yeah, so it has both sides in it. That's also what makes it very fascinating here. Another thing about Buddhist ethics, and this is kind of where we really get into what Buddhist ethics is about, that the majority of religions in the world, when they talk about ethics, they normally talk about rules of ethics. Yeah, you have like even in Buddhism we have rules. Yeah, 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts, etc., 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 up to almost infinite precepts. I have translated the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the monastic rules and regulations, and there are many, many, many tiny, minute rules in that. That's not infinite, but it feels like it when you're translating it. So this is the idea of ethics. The ethics is rules to some extent, but actually in Buddhism, ethics is much more than rules. Ethics is about intention. But why you are doing things, right? And this is a very significant difference between Buddhism and most other teachings that you will find, even in secular society very often. Intention sometimes is used, but not always. And so this is a very important distinction, and it means, because we are dealing with intention, we're dealing with motivation, what is driving us, it means that we have a very flexible system of ethics in Buddhism, because it comes down to our motivation. What is driving our actions? That is the most important thing. And that allows us to meet any kind of modern challenges in terms of ethics in a kind of a reasonable way, because we can use reason really to discern what is right and what is wrong here. So these are some of the ideas of Buddhism that makes the Buddhist idea of ethics very important. And in a sense, the root of the Buddhist idea of ethics, if you look at it, the root is the idea, well, we shouldn't hurt other people. That's the root of ethics, The ethics of Buddhism is not about kind of random rules about who you should believe in and that sort of stuff. The idea is always about what is painful for others. And if you do something which is painful to others deliberately, that is unethical. If you do something that is kind to others deliberately, that is ethical. It's a very kind of sensible system of ethics. And I think it is a system of ethics that a large, the world in general could very well pay a lot more attention to when they look at how to apply ethics in whatever situation, in war zones or in the United Nations or whatever. This is a system that I think everyone can kind of agree on. So the root idea is not to hurt others, but to make others happy. And so that is an idea you can use in your own life, right? Am I doing this to hurt someone, or am I doing something to be kind to somebody? And then some people would say, well, but I don't know sometimes what hurts other people. But what if I don't know? I don't really understand other people well. Sometimes I mean well, but they still get hurt, right? It's a very, very common experience that we have. You want to do the right thing. The other person still gets hurt, right? And this is kind of sometimes difficult. So what are the ethics in that kind of situation? And that is where the reason why the Buddha says, well, the intention is what matters. As long as we are trying, as long as we are intending to do the right thing, we're coming from a good heart. That is important. We can never know exactly how other people will react to your actions, but what you can know is the quality of your heart right now. And that quality is what makes something ethical or unethical. Am I greedy? Am I doing this for myself? Or am I truly generous? Am I coming from ill will, or am I coming because I really want the benefit of the other person? Am I coming from love, friendliness, compassion? Am I coming from a confused and deluded mind, or am I coming from a sense of wisdom? And these are the ways to then decide ultimately whether something is ethical or not. And this whole thing becomes a very interesting system of ethics. So now let us look at what the Buddha specifically says in the gradual training about ethical conduct. What I have just told you now is really pulling things together from many sources in the suttas. You need to know the various sources, pull it all together, then you will know these kind of how to present it in this kind of way. You don't find this sort of presentation directly in the suttas. So now we're going to look at how it is presented in a specific sutta, the Sāmaññaphala Sutta. So here we go. And how, great king, is a mendicant accomplished in ethics? So just briefly to comment, this is why I don't like too much text, because I want to kind of ideally comment on things statement by statement. There is a research done that when you have PowerPoint, people learn less. Isn't that interesting research? Yeah, because your attention is divided, right? You don't really know what to look there or to listen here, and you kind of, you get... So I'm kind of... anyway, this is what we're doing. So anyway, so great king, he's talking to King Ajātasattu. This is how you talk to kings in those days. Maharaja, great king. And mendicant here is just a word for a monastic. Mendicants. So you have the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis. They were the mendicants in those days. So usually this here is the word here is usually bhikkhave, which means monks. But Bhante Sujato translates as a mendicant. And I just want to maybe, just for those of you who haven't heard these things so much before, mendicant is a very precise translation for the idea of bhikkhu. Because bhikkhu literally means an alms mendicant, an alms receiver, someone who goes out and actually receives the alms from people around the world. That is exactly what a bhikkhu is. A bhikkhu and a bhikkhuni is ideally someone who goes into the village and they will then receive the support of the lay people in the village. You see this in Sri Lanka in the present day. You see this in all the Buddhist countries. You see this going on now. It's a very beautiful thing, and we do it a little bit here as well, just to kind of live up to those traditions. So you are a mendicant. You are a receiver of the support of others. And of course, that entails certain obligations in return. And we'll look at this more as we come down here. A mendicant is like an old-fashioned English word, but that is exactly what it means, and for that reason it is useful. And also it is gender neutral. If you say monk, then it's no longer gender neutral. And this is also the benefit here, that many of these suttas were spoken to both monks and nuns. And for that reason it's quite kind of nice to have a gender neutral term, which I think is good. So this is Bhante Sujato's translation here. The downside is a little bit obscure. Many people say mendicant, what's that? And so fair enough. Accomplished in ethics, or accomplished in virtue, accomplished in morality, sila sampanno. So what does it mean to be accomplished in this? And to be accomplished means that in the highest sense, it means that you have like entered the stream. Sila paripura is kind of a... Paripura means to fulfill. So someone who has fulfilled the sila is someone who has entered the stream, someone who has that full insight into the Buddhist teachings. These are kind of technical Buddhist words about, attaining full insight into the teachings. Stream entry, sotapanna, sotapatti in Pali. So this is the usual meaning of this. But here we can take it in a slightly lesser sense. It just means that you are practicing this fully, really kind of getting into this kind of practices. You are accomplished. It is something that we are striving towards, something we're trying to achieve, not something that you kind of have achieved. Ethics is always, you're never going to be absolutely perfect until you become a stream enter, sotapanna, because only then do you internalize these teachings, and only then do you internalize the idea of ethics. So you become, it's in a sense, you become these teachings. That's kind of remarkable. You become them because those qualities, you become filled with those qualities of the Dhamma, and one of those qualities is the idea of sila. So a Buddha is really like the walking embodiment of the Dhamma. He has completed those qualities, and that is why he's called a Buddha. And anyone who becomes an Arahant, a fully awakened one, is the same. So you become psychologically 100% sound, 100% happy, 100% at ease. By the way, usually I say that you are very welcome to ask questions as we go along. So this is true now as well. You're very welcome to ask, especially those of you who are new. Don't feel that, be shy just because it's the first time you think, oh, my question is really silly. Silly questions are usually the good ones, so very, very free to ask silly questions. So this is the idea of accomplished in virtue. We're trying to reach this lofty ideal as closely as we can. Yeah, this is kind of the purpose here. So accomplished in ethics doesn't mean that you are finished yet, but you are trying to move towards this. The other thing I should say here, you will notice that this is the Buddha speaking, right? He's talking to the king. Even the Buddha calls the king great king. He doesn't just call him householder or something like that. He probably. So I think sometimes you have to follow the conventions of society. Yeah, so that's kind of what the Buddha does here. Anyway, it's easy to get sidetracked with all kind of things, but I'm not going to try not to do that. And so he is speaking. You can see here he's making the point that he's saying a mendicant, yeah, so a monastic. So what this teaching, training here we're seeing here is about is really the training of a monastic. And this is why these conduct we're talking about now, it only fully applies to monastics. But a large part of the training in virtue is the same, whether you are a monastic or a layperson. Yeah, it doesn't make any difference. So it is really as applicable to you as it is. Most of it, anyway, is as applicable. I will point out to some differences as we go along. Okay, so now let's get to see what this is all about. Yeah, so how is that? It's when a mendicant gives up the killing of living creatures. Renouncing the rod and the sword, they are scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion for all living beings. This pertains to their ethics. What is this? Okay, it's a comment, but for some reason it doesn't show. I'm not sure why. All right, never mind. It's Bhante Sudatta's comment on this section. So I'm going to comment on it anyway, so never mind. So this is the idea of giving up. This is the first kind of right conduct, giving up the giving up the killing of living beings. And this is the same as the first precept that we have, the 5 precepts for kind of the ordinary conduct in daily life. And so this is obviously very important. And the reason why it is first is because it is one of the most important of the ideas of ethics. Not to kill living creatures. What does that mean? It means any living creature. It means don't kill human beings. So if you kill human beings, please stop. Hopefully you don't do that anyway. Any killers? Have anyone here killed a human being before? No? Okay, good. It might be scary to have someone like that. Okay, good. So at least we have the baseline of ethics is already in place. But of course, living beings is much more than human beings. Living beings actually is all animals. And from a Buddhist point of view, all animals, even insects, are considered living creatures in this way. And there is an ethical content to whether you kill even an insect. It has an ethical significance. So in Buddhism, and why? Well, the reason because they can feel. Even insects, they feel the world. And it's kind of one of those astonishing, weird things that in the Western society, we haven't really kind of had this idea. Animals have been considered almost like machines. They don't really feel anything. And for that reason, you can kind of kill them willy-nilly. This has kind of been the idea coming up through the ages in Western society, Europe, and these kind of things. And it's kind of a crazy idea when you think about it. I don't know how we ever got that idea. Anyone who knows animals knows that they obviously have feelings, that they are very much like us in many ways, right? And so the Buddhism is that extension. Okay, we don't kill humans because they feel. Animals feel too. They feel fear. They feel all of these kind of things. And so you're kind even to animals. But of course, as you go down the hierarchy of animals, the more complex animals like humans, we have very complex emotions and we can feel a lot of feelings. A mosquito obviously sees the world in a very, very different way from human beings, and everything is much simpler, everything is quite different. And for that reason, the killing of a mosquito is considered far less significant in terms of morality than killing a human being. So it's not as important. But if you want to purify your virtue, you have to stop killing any kind of living being. This is kind of the idea here. But you can go even beyond that. You can ask yourself, where exactly is the cutoff line? when can we kind of, what does it mean, a living being? Where's the cutoff line? And it's hard to know really exactly. The Pali word is panatipata. Pana means a breathing being. And so arguably you could say that what that means is as long as you have a metabolism, because metabolism is like using oxygen to survive. Anything that has metabolism, maybe you shouldn't kill, so amoebas maybe, or even some microbes. Viruses apparently don't have metabolism. Viruses don't really live in an ordinary way, so it seems they're not encompassed by this. But it's all a bit artificial. And of course, when it comes to things like health, and especially the health of the body, then killing bacteria is not usually considered a problem from a Buddhist point of view. Taking medicines is usually considered acceptable. But any living being that you kind of see in nature in general, we avoid killing it, because usually they have some kind of very refined or very subtle form of consciousness, even those living beings. So you avoid killing living beings, but that is not all. Then you have the idea of renouncing the rod and the sword. Rod, danda in Pali. And danda, it is very similar to the idea of stick in English, So and stick is like punishment, And in Pali it's exactly the same. The word danda also means punishment. And so we avoid not just the killing of living beings, but we avoid the punishment. We avoid the physical, hitting someone or striking someone, or the kind of, physical pain, because no one wants physical pain, and so we don't do that. That is kind of an important point here, because very often we think of the 5 precepts, the first one, as just not killing, but actually, as you can see here, is more than just not killing. Torturing or hitting or in any way physically oppressing someone goes against this precept, right? Any kind of bad conduct in that particular area. So rod, punishment, stick, all of these things are bad ideas. Sword, of course, also is like a object that we use for torture, maybe for cutting off limbs or something, or anything like that. So all of these things, any kind of physical punishment like this is actually included right there in this precept, which is interesting. I think maybe not always pointed out. But then comes the interesting part. Now we talked about the negative thing, and here is where the positive part comes in. And this is not included in the first precept. The first precept just says you shouldn't kill living beings, but here it gives a much broader definition of what this means. You should be scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion for all living beings. This is what we should be doing. The negative morality, don't do the bad. The positive morality, be kind and caring and compassionate towards all living beings. Do the things that they like. Be kind to them through your actions, through how you are. This is the ideal here. And so this, again, as I said before, it shows this duality here. Do the good, don't do the bad. But what is also very interesting about this, and this is what I was talking about before, is that you will notice here that the idea expressed here is the idea that you don't kill and you are compassionate. In other words, the reason why you don't kill is because you are compassionate. So the motivation is that you are compassionate. But what about in the situation where you kill out of compassion? How does that fit into this? It doesn't really fit in, right? Because this talks about compassion and not killing as if the two are the same. But are there situations when you can kill, but actually you are compassionate? Let's say that someone, we had this voluntary assisted dying law coming through here in Western Australia, where you are, in certain circumstances, you can get approved to be, to end your life because you just had enough and things are really difficult. And I think, to me, that sounds like a very compassionate thing to do. If people want to die, do we have the right to tell them, you must live? It's a kind of torture, isn't it? I want to die, please. You must live. I'm telling you, you have no choice. You will have to live. Is that compassionate? And this is kind of the weird thing, right? If you are from a Christian point of view, life is often considered sacrosanct. And because life itself is sacrosanct, it means that any kind of killing of life is considered bad. So if someone wants to die, say, no, you cannot die, you must live, because God lived this life. Whether you want to die or not is irrelevant. Yeah, we're going to force you to live. And you can almost use that as a torture technique, right? I don't like you, so I'm going to make you live. Ha ha ha, evil. Almost, you can almost see it that way. And so I would argue that if someone is in their right mind, they're kind of come to the end of their life, they don't really feel they can do anything anymore, and they want to die, do we have the right to tell them that you must live? I don't think so. And in that kind of situation, I would say that compassion and killing can actually be it's not really killing anymore. That's kind of the point, right? Because killing kind of implies no compassion. It implies harshness. But it's more like helping someone out of suffering, really. But you can see here how there are some nuances here. It is not kind of black and white. And because of those nuances, this is why, again, the Buddhist idea of ethics is so refined and so nuanced, and it kind of gives us the ability to deal with these very tricky situations. So I remember when we were looking at this law here in Western Australia, voluntary assisted dying, I think Ajahn Brahm, he wrote a letter in support of that in the Western Australian. Why should we not have this law here in Western Australia? As a monk, I can never recommend anyone to die, because that kind of goes against my precepts. But the general idea that there can be such a law is not really, is something that you cannot, it's not really wrong to support as such. So this is what we're trying to do in our life. We're trying to develop the compassion, develop all of these beautiful qualities inside of us. And this is what so much of the Buddhist practice is about, developing those good qualities. And you may already, probably everyone here has some degree of compassion. That's kind of, because that's kind of part of being a human being. But this can be developed much more. Compassion, the building up of the good qualities can be furthered a lot more. And sometimes it is only our imagination that stops us from understanding how compassionate, how kind, and how scrupulous it is possible to be. You can develop this again and again and again, building it up to become very powerful things. And on Friday night I talked about this idea of developing perceptions. A very important part of the Buddhist teachings. And perceptions are like the raw material that when you work on it in the right way, you can build up compassion. How do we build up compassion out of perceptions? Well, it's quite simple. If you really see other people suffering, right, and you know it isn't really their fault, non-self, suffering and non-self coming together, and also you know that you have the ability to alleviate and help that, and you want to alleviate and you want to help, the more you reflect like that, and the more you build that perception up in your mind, the more compassion you're going to have in the world. So it is really about how we look at others that gives rise to compassion or not. And by building up those perceptions, those underlying ideas, those views about how the world is and how people are, we are actually giving rise to compassion in this way. Compassion comes from this kind of development. And this is something we can do throughout the day. You can always develop more compassion. You see the suffering, you see the potential to be kind and helpful, and you use that possibility, and you build up these qualities within. So this you can see why even this very first rule of ethics, why you can spend your whole life just developing this one rule, right? This one thing is actually a whole lifetime's of work until you become fully compassionate like the Buddha was, and spending his whole life just teaching and just kind of, in a sense, renouncing, giving up his own ability to meditate all the time because he was teaching so much. And this becomes what your life is about. So right there, in the very first rule of ethics, almost the whole path of Buddhism is found right there. That means we can stop the sutta, is that right? The whole thing is already done. He agrees, he wants to go home, I think. Sorry, Venerable, I'm being naughty, that's good, But it's kind of true, right? And this is kind of the kind of extraordinary things about the suttas, when you bore into one element of the suttas, one element of the Buddhist path, almost the whole path is found within that element. And I remember Bhante Sujato had this idea of the fractal aspect of Buddhism. You know about fractal geometry? This fractal geometry is a kind of very... I'm sure you must have seen some of these pictures of fractal geometry. It's like you have a certain shape, and then you focus in on that shape, and the same shape is found on the smaller level, and you focus in on that one, but the same shape is found on that level, yeah? It's called the Mandelbrot set or something like that, fractal geometry, where the pattern repeats themselves at different levels. And the Buddhist teachings are a bit like that, yeah? You can focus in, you can focus out. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I thought that was kind of fascinating, because there's some truth to that. So the whole path is almost there. Okay, there's lacking a little bit maybe in the wisdom thing, because compassion takes you a long way, but it may not take you all the way to the full wisdom, but it takes you a long way on the path. Please, Ananda. Yeah.
Ajahn, when you mentioned this fractal concept, would you say all these have come from the naturally accepted good principles, natural laws? Buddha revealed to the world the natural laws.
Yes.
So therefore, the broadest picture, everything has come from the naturally accepted good principles.
Yeah.
Would you say? Because he says, I think number of places, especially in that Dhammapada, that nahi vere na verani, that it's a natural principle.
Right, yeah, it's a natural law, exactly.
Natural law.
Yeah.
So that is the biggest picture.
Yeah.
And from that has evolved, or rather, Buddha, these are all the Buddhas, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the Buddhas would have established these
the same thing.
rules.
Yeah, exactly. So there is just a discovery. It's a discovery of a natural law. Exactly, that's what it is.
Natural law.
And then you can focus in on that natural law, on the small aspects, and in the small aspects has also found the larger pictures. Everything is kind of self-referential in this way, referring to itself back and forth. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So within the natural law, then first we have the Four Noble Truths, and then the Fold Path, and then all the others following.
Yeah.
And these are
the famous sutta, Majjhima Nikāya 28, the Mahāhattipadopana Sutta, the sutta on the greater sutta on the elephant's footprint, is kind of one of these things. It starts off with the Four Noble Truths, then it goes to the First Noble Truth.
Yes.
And from the First Noble Truth, he goes to the five aggregates. Five aggregates, he goes to the Rupa aggregate. From the Rupa aggregate, he goes to the four elements. From that, he goes to the Rupa element, first of all. And he kind of goes down, level by level. And this is almost like this. And so you go down to the small one, and then within that small one, the whole Four Noble Truths can be found again. He then brings it back, the Four Noble Truths. And so it's kind of, that sutta is actually very interesting in that way, how everything is, the large picture is contained in the smallest element, and the large picture also contains the small elements themselves. So it's a kind of this self-referential. Yeah.
And Ajahn Ganha is one of the key, what shall I say, sayings is that Dhamma is natural.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think this came from Ajahn Chah actually.
Ajahn Chah.
Yeah, he was saying, but that's maybe, that's a similar. It's kind of the same thing, because this is the idea that whatever experience you have in the world is all Dhamma. Everything is Dhamma. Yeah, and you can always see Dhamma everywhere, impermanence. If your eyes are open, the nature of the world is always teaching you if you are ready for things. The uncertainty, the unreliability, the non-self nature, the suffering, all of this is always there in front of your eyes if you're open to it. That's good. Yeah, now, it's one of the things that I find very interesting about the Buddhist teachings, and I gave a talk about that quite recently, is the idea that the Buddhist system of seeing the world is a naturalistic system. It is naturalism. It's like science is also naturalism. It's about understanding nature. And Buddhism is about understanding nature. Buddhism is not about supernatural things. Everything is within nature. And this is what makes it, to my mind, a acceptable system, precisely because it is natural in that way. Yes, there are things that are different. Yes, there are things that are not normal, maybe, but they're still natural. And that is an important point. All right. Anyone else want to say anything? Yeah. Eddie? Okay. Yeah.
Ajahn Brahmali, in the screen, the shorter section on ethics, it says renouncing the rod and the sword, That is the olden times, isn't it? So in the modern times now, that includes bombings from aeroplane and shooting missiles, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, it includes bombing. Bombing is no good. Don't recommend bombing here. Yeah, even shooting with guns not recommended. So this just what this means, that any kind of physical punishment is bad. That's what it means basically.
Thank you.
And of course, any kind of warfare is included in that. So absolutely. All right. So you're all happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So this is what I mean, that the Buddhist system of ethics is quite unique in many ways, and it's really quite exceptional, and for that reason very interesting. Okay. So this pertains to the ethics. Someone who goes forth in this way. Then we come to the second rule of ethics that pertains to the bodily actions. They give up stealing. They take only what's given. They expect only what's given. They keep themselves pure by not stealing. This pertains to their ethics. Oh, I see. Now there we are. It's coming up. Okay. All right. So this is the second one, not stealing, not killing living beings, not stealing. In other words, not taking anything which is not rightfully yours. So you only take what is given to you, or what is naturally or rightfully yours. So obviously a very important point. Then we have the idea that you expect only what is given, and I always found that a little bit strange, that particular translation, because what does it mean to expect only what is given? And what it seems to mean is that you only want what is given. You don't desire things that are not given to you. In other words, you don't want to steal. You don't have even the thought of stealing, right? But you always accept it at what comes naturally. And so here again you can see this idea that you start off with the idea of not physically taking anything which isn't yours, and that goes into the mind as well. You don't actually even want to steal. Even the idea of taking something that is not yours, or what is given to you, or is naturally yours, feels wrong. And you don't even think about that. So the mind and the body kind of coming together in this way. And then it has this interesting sentence that you keep yourself pure or clean, it says here, by not stealing or thieving. And the idea here seems to be that if you steal, then there is a degree of you feel impure as a consequence of that. You feel yucky. You feel like you've touched something yucky, and you feel bad inside because of that. So this is, if you want that degree of purity, you really have to avoid not taking what is not yours. So this is true in everything in life, right? Not stealing, in kind of the whole breadth of our existence, from the smallest little theft to the kind of largest one. So we live in purity in this way. Now the opposite of stealing, we have already seen the opposite of kind of killing and treating people badly, which is actually compassion. The opposite of stealing is not actually mentioned, and the reason it's not mentioned is because it is found everywhere else in the suttas. That is, of course, generosity. When you steal something, you are thinking about yourself, you are being very egocentric, and all of these kind of things. But when you are generous, it is the opposite kind of mind state. You're not egocentric. You are sharing with the world. These are opposite kind of mental qualities. One is bad, one is wholesome. And if you can kind of think about it for a while, what does it feel like to steal something? I don't know if you have ever stolen anything, but if you haven't ever stolen, you can kind of just try the mental exercise of stealing and see what it feels like. And think about that versus the idea of generosity. And if you feel those feelings, you will feel the difference. One is a small feeling that is about you. It's about your little world. I want something. It's about greed. And it's a very limiting and ugly kind of feeling inside of you. Whereas the idea of generosity is where you reach out to the world, is the opposite of locking yourself into your own little world, and instead reaching out to the world around you. It's like you're opening up your heart, so to speak, to the whole world. And that difference will give you an idea of the difference between what is spiritual in this world, what is truly wholesome, compared to what is unwholesome, and greedy and selfish. Sometimes little exercises like that, feeling the distinction between the two can be very useful for understanding why one is positive and why one is negative, and what it means to live a truly spiritual life. So the reason then why generosity is not mentioned here is because generosity is talked about so many other places in the suttas, because it is such an important foundation on the Buddhist path. And it is something that everyone in this world should really, we should all try to do more of that, whether even monastics, lay people, everyone, because it is such an important part of what this is about. Again, is there any situations where stealing might be okay? Well, look at your motivations. Maybe there is some extreme situation where taking something which is not given might be acceptable, because maybe you just have the intention of borrowing something, or you are in a desperate situation, or someone is dying, or there's always some extreme situations where taking something in this way might be okay, because you're coming from compassion and kindness rather than some negative motivation. All right. So what do people think about this? Any thoughts? Robin Hood. Was it Robin Hood? Was he right or was he wrong? Yeah. So the question is, I can just repeat the question, Conrad. Yeah, it's fine. What about stealing from the rich and giving to the poor? It's not really, still not right, because you're still stealing, And so it is not super bad necessarily. But again, it depends on why you do it. Do you do it because you hate the rich, or you do it because you love the poor, right? So again, remember, motivation is what makes something right or wrong. So it's not the act itself is often cannot tell you whether something is right or wrong. So you have to look into a person's heart. Why are they doing this? I hate the rich. I just want to, and I'm gonna give to the poor, but I really hate the rich. Or I have so much compassion for the poor. Okay, the rich, I feel sorry for them. They will suffer a bit, but I just have to do this. Two very different ideas, in the mind. So why are you doing these things? So this matters. But in this case, it's still not right, because you are actually stealing. So it is not the right way of doing things. In that case, we should try to get a more just society. We should try to kind of have a society which kind of supports the people who are really struggling a bit more. And generally speaking, my understanding is that the societies in the world that are the most happy is where you have a degree of equality. If there's too much inequality in society, it creates unhappiness all around. The rich people, they kind of fence themselves in their little communities, with big walls, because they're afraid of poor people kind of coming and robbing them. And the poor people feel really kind of hard done by because society is not supporting them. So a certain degree of compassion and equality, I think, is really important in society for having. Exactly where that line goes is very hard to say, but I think as a general principle, it's really important. There is a lot of very interesting psychological research about these things today, and it's generally known that is true. More equal societies are happier societies. Everyone is happier, including the rich. So why don't we do it? Kind of obvious. Anyway, Eddie.
Sorry, Ajahn Brahmali. I'd like to say something, but before I say so, I'd like to say that I've got no animosity against any religion, okay? And I won't mention any religion specifically, but I just say religions, okay? Just regarding this war now, just recently I read comments, okay? Comments from top people, in the war section. It says that the prophecies, from that religion, it says that they have to go and kill, and flatten the place, okay, to take the land, okay. That's killing sin, okay. And the stealing is they have to go and how they say and get the land,
Steal the land.
Yeah, they steal the land because God says so. The thing,
Yeah.
So that's why you have all this. On the other hand, we have the compassion from Buddhist sense, and this one's from religion. It's stated, and the top people, they quote the Bible too. That they're doing this because the Bible, the prophecy says that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why what we need in the world, we need a arbiter, someone who judges, that is above religions, beyond religions. And this is why we have things like human rights. Yeah? Human rights are things that were laid down by the United Nations. And the United Nations is a non-religious body. It is above the religions. And that's the right way of dealing with those situations, to say that in these situations we cannot deal with religion because religion is biased. Religion supports one particular people over someone else. So we have to the religion should be lower down the hierarchy, human rights should be at the top. And this is one of the things that we have argued. I mean, on a few occasions I've been to Curtin University and given a lecture there on human rights. Usually we were invited every year to do that. And that was one of the arguments I was always making, that just because I'm a Buddhist, I don't want Buddhism to be on top. What should be on top is human rights. The good thing about Buddhism, we kind of fall in line with human rights anyway, quite nicely, so it's not an issue for us. But for some religion, it's actually much more tricky. But human rights should be on top, because that is where we can avoid these kind of clashes, in that way. So religion should always be... You cannot do violence in the name of religion from a Buddhist point of view. That's not acceptable. Anyone else?
Ajahn?
Conrad? Yeah, please.
I was just thinking about things like tax, or even small things like paying for parking. Where you're not actually maybe stealing an object.
Yeah.
I wonder how that might fit in with it. If it could be done, if it were to be done honestly, say someone offered a service and then offered it for cash and didn't pay tax, how that might fit within this precept.
Yeah, that's tax is kind of tricky, I suppose, because tax is, you might disagree with the tax system, right? So you never agreed. And there are some people who argue that taxation is stealing. Some people who make that argument. But really the reality is that we need some kind of taxation, because otherwise our society collapses. We need it to keep up the roads, to have the schools, to have the judicial system, to have the police. All of that relies on taxation. And our society wouldn't really work. So I think, I would say that generally speaking, it's the moral thing to do is to kind of pay your taxes, I would say. It's like an agreement we have in society. Okay, we have a democracy. In democracy, we run it in this way. And the results of democracy is that we have these rules. Okay, we kind of agree on that system. So we should live up to the rules of that system. So in a case of not paying a parking fee, right? If you have to park, well, it is the deal is that if you park there, you're supposed to pay, right? It's not living up to the deal. So even though it is not taking anything, it is still a kind of falls under the idea of stealing, because you are not living up to the deal. Yeah, that is there. Yeah.
So would it depend on your agreement with the deal? So say if in your values or for whatever reason, I'm not anti-tax or anti-parking anyway, I'm just trying to, just maybe think about it when we're looking at this precept. But if, say, someone didn't agree with the deal, would it have the same sort of karmic influence for them?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe because maybe you're doing it from some kind of principle. I mean, everything in the end of the day comes from your intentions. I still think probably wouldn't be wholesome, because we are part of the society. If you use all the benefits of that society, I mean, you're bound to drive on the roads, for example, right? You're using the benefits, but then you don't pay your taxes. I mean, it's not. It doesn't seem to me. It seems a bit dodgy. Yeah. So I think of course, yes, it will vary a bit on why you're doing things, because motivation is always an important factor in these things. But I think at the end of the day, it's probably not. Probably not a little bit bad. Yeah. In a way, the opposite is actually much more beautiful, and you think, well, actually, okay, I pay to the government. I don't always agree with everything that the money is used for. Some of the money goes to the military. I may not agree about that. But in general, it's holding society together, right? The fact that we pay taxes. It makes all of these things possible, and I'm also a beneficiary of this. Okay. I like to support other people as well. It's a wonderful opportunity to kind of bring us together and have a good society together. So I will willingly pay my taxes, and here's an extra few dollars for you. So kind of generous to the tax man. They kind of give up a bit of extra, whatever. And this is just a kind of a positive view of how the money is used. It's just another way of kind of being being generous in a sense. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that kind of generosity. I think it's much more powerful to be generous interpersonally when you do it to someone who is there, yeah, because you see the person, you know who they are, you know the suffering, you know the problems, and that kind of generosity, when you help someone immediately, you feel that straight away. Okay, if you give I know that there is this movement in the world. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called effective altruism. And it's this idea that you give where you get most bang for the buck. Yeah, you get most return for the gift. Yeah, and so you kind of think, well, if I give, where will it have most return, right? So you kind of build up this spreadsheet with where kind of you get most things back. Okay, if I give to this power plant in Kenya, that will give most overall benefit. Yeah, so you give your money to that power plant. But the problem is that it's a very calculating, yeah, and it becomes very cold kind of giving. Yeah? And when you give in a very cold way, it doesn't touch your heart in very much at all. Yeah, it becomes this kind of. And I was reminded, I was in Malaysia a few years ago, and I was told there, well, in Malaysia we all have these spreadsheets. Yeah, they were joking, of course, but this is kind of how they kind of were saying it. We have all this spreadsheet, and we have kind of, this person is an arahant, this one is an anagama, this is sort of, and if I give there, I get so much, so much return if I give there, and so they kind of calculate how to get maximum return by giving to these kind of people, right? And then the question was, is this the right way of doing things? And of course it's not, because it's cold. Yeah, it is not coming from the heart, and because of that it doesn't really work. It will still have an effect because you're still giving. They were joking about themselves basically. They were just having a laugh at their own expense, which is always kind of nice. But there's a little bit of that idea. Yeah, you want to have returns. A little bit too much greed involved in that kind of giving. And so the best kind of giving, I would say, is where you give to someone who is there close by, someone you know, where you can feel kind of straight away the human connection with someone. Yeah, you support someone like a beggar in the street, and suddenly you have all this compassion for a beggar in the street. Yeah, and you give them something. Yeah, and that moment you're making a human connection with someone who is suffering. Yeah, someone who has a problem, and you just give something. Yeah. And I know that in my own life, sometimes I've been the benefactor of people's, as a monk, I'm the benefactor of people's kindness all the time. And it's one of the beautiful things about being a monastic. But even before I was a monastic, I remember sometimes people did something really kind to you. And it's like, wow, it's so touching, right? You actually do make a human connection with people when you give us something suddenly out of the blue like that. It's a very beautiful thing. But if you use this idea of effective altruism, where you give to the most effective thing on the planet, and they have some really weird ideas, some really strange ideas about the survival of humanity in the next billion years, that kind of ideas. How can I ensure the maximum effect over these enormous spans, that kind of thing. And to me, it does not make sense from a Buddhist point of view, because it forgets about the personal effect that giving is supposed to have. And that's the problem. Mr. Mirihagala.
I'm thinking what was going on in King Ajātasattu's mind when the Buddha was teaching this. Now, the Sāmaññaphala Sutta, the question asked is from each religious teacher, originally, from the start, was how would your mendicants, or how is your monastics behave, isn't it? Then there's no question about the lay people. It doesn't relate to lay person.
You mean at the beginning of the sutta?
Yeah, at the beginning of the whole sutta.
Yeah.
So now, he was not a mendicant when he killed his father, isn't it?
Yeah, he never was a mendicant, yeah.
That's right,
yeah.
So maybe by this time he must be thinking, okay, I'm not a mendicant at that time, so I'm exempt. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
And there was no mention anywhere, even down the line. The Buddha explained that, okay, these are actually equally applicable to a normal human being. Yeah. Isn't it? These are rules of nature. Yes.
Yeah. True.
But probably this is not where King Ajātasattu got the idea, okay, I did the wrong thing.
He had already killed his father.
Yeah, that's right. By this time, he has already killed the father.
And whether you know or not that this is bad, it still will have the same effect.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
So karma is karma. Yeah, yeah,
That's right, yeah.
yeah.
So Buddha
Yeah.
did not use this sutta to tell him you did the wrong thing yet.
Yeah. No, the Buddha doesn't kind of tell. It's interesting. The Buddha doesn't. I mean, according to the latest Buddhist tradition, you go to a really bad rebirth if you kill your father, right? But the Buddha doesn't say that to him.
No.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah.
He only answered the question, exact question.
Exactly, precisely. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And I think if you tell someone that because of your actions you're going to be reborn in a really bad realm, like a hell realm or whatever, you may actually be very detrimental for that person because they will feel really, really, really bad, right? Imagine if you know this, it may destroy the rest of your life as a consequence. And so, I think the Buddha probably did the right thing in not saying anything. Yeah. So, which is fascinating. Yeah. Thanks, Prem.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick comment on that,
Yeah.
Ajahn. Sorry. I think at the end of the sutta, Buddha very firmly tells the king that yes, you did something foolish.
Yeah.
Because king himself says that please forgive me.
He does.
That because I did foolish thing by killing my righteous king, my father.
Yeah.
I did that wrong. So Buddha did not try to, what shall I say, pacify him.
Yeah, no,
But
absolutely.
He very firmly said,
Yeah.
you did the wrong thing,
Yeah.
you by killing your father who was a very righteous king. So I think by that time he would have got the message that I did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah. Don't reveal everything, Anna, because otherwise no need to come back. No need later on. No, but you're right. You're quite right, and it's good to have a preview anyway. I'm just joking around, but what he says is that because he's feeling remorse, right? Very strong remorse, and of course the Buddha will accept that. And sometimes that is a skillful thing to do, is actually to accept someone's remorse and to allow them and to then give them forgiveness as far as you can forgive them. That is a skillful thing to do. If you say, oh, no worries, don't worry about it, it's fine, that is also maybe not quite true, right? Maybe it isn't quite fine. So the Buddha does that, and then he says, after the king has left, he then says to the monks, well, if he hadn't killed his father, he would have become a stream enterer. Basically, had destroyed his spiritual potential by killing his father. And then in the later other parts of the canon, it says that, well, if you kill your father or mother or an arahant like that, then basically you're doomed to a bad rebirth in the future. You cannot ordain as a monk. Yeah, all these things are blocked off from you if you do that. And so because you are, been damaged badly in a sense. Yeah. Everyone else is happy? Yeah, okay, good. Glad you're happy. Yeah. Happy customers. So let's move on to the next. This is why this Sutta class take a long time. Now we know why they take such a long time. But it's kind of nice. I don't know, I enjoy going slowly. Yeah, there's no point in rushing these things. We just want to teach Dhamma anyway. You go fast or slow, it's the same thing here. So, but if you do feel that I'm going terribly slow, just tell me off. And I will take it on board. Because I don't want to torture people. Torture people is bad karma for me. So, okay, next one. They give up unchastity. They are celibate, set apart, avoiding the vulgar act of sex. This pertains to their ethics. So this is now we're talking about the monastic path. Yeah. So here we're talking about the give up unchastity is the brahmacharya. So it's the abrahmacharya viramani. I give up, and basically what chastity is not such a good word. It basically means giving up all sexual activity. So it's very broad. All sexual activity is abandoned. Yeah. This is kind of the idea here, and that's why. You avoid sex, but not just all actions related to sex is what you avoid. And an interesting word is the word vulgar. Yeah, the word vulgar is usually these days it means something coarse. Yeah, something really bad. And of course there is some. It fits the context a little bit. But the Pali word is gamma, and gamma means related to the village. And the village is like the ordinary people in ancient India. So it means something like avoiding the ordinary act, the common act of sexuality. That's really kind of the real sense, I think, of this word and the real purpose of it. And usually when we talk about this particular act of ethics, we talk about not doing harm through sexuality. Yeah, and this is the kamesu miccācara, wrong actions in sensuality or in the sexual realm. So that is the ordinary precept for lay people. Yeah, if you live an ordinary life. But here it's taken one step further. That's why this refers to monastics. So there's two stages here. So this is one of the stages where there's a clear difference between the two. Why do we do this? And it seems like, a lot of people around the world says, well, why give up the fun in life, right? That's kind of the idea. Yeah, people are just having a good time, enjoying kind of the relationships or whatever. Why should we give that up? And we want to have both. We want to have good meditation and we want to enjoy the world, right? This is the standard way that people think about this. The reason is simply that the opposite of sexuality is deep meditation. People don't really usually understand that these are opposite sides. Yeah, and the reason for that is actually very simple once you understand what is going on. Because any enjoyment in the world, whether it's the sights or the sounds or sexuality or whatever, is the mind going out into that world. It's an enjoying something external to you. That is what it is. Whereas meditation is going within. Yeah? And to be able to go within, you have to let go of what is outside. You cannot be both within and outside at the same time. And the more enjoyment you have in the world outside, in that world of the five senses, the more you're going to be attached to that world, and the more difficult it is going to be to let go when you meditate. These things go in opposite directions. So when we talk about, previously we talked about stealing, the opposite of stealing is generosity. Yeah, you have the two spans. The opposite of indulging in the world of the five senses, especially sexuality, because of its nature, the opposite there is meditation, is samadhi. They are the opposites. And this is a very important point, because people don't fully grasp, especially, I think this is a really big problem in the Western world, because we haven't really got used to the ideas of Buddhism, don't understand what renunciation is for. What is the purpose of renouncing? And this, of course, is one of the really fundamental aspects of renunciation. Renunciation has many, many degrees to it. And I think it would be nice to give a talk on renunciation more fully, completely here, maybe at Dhammaloka at one point. But this is a very important part of it, and it is a necessary part to really stabilize the meditation practice. And that is why we live the way we do as monastics. That's kind of the whole point of it, the whole purpose of it. And that is why the monastic path is really closer to emulating the Buddhist ideal. You get closer to the Buddhist ideal, and you are more likely to find people among monastics who have profound meditation, who have real insight, more likely to find it there than among lay people, precisely because it gets closer to the ideal of what it means to be enlightened or whatever. So these are the two sides here of this particular precept. Yeah. So giving up all the fun in life to gain a higher kind of fun. That's kind of the thing. This is kind of the beautiful thing about renunciation. Renunciation, in English the word renunciation is kind of it's like a killjoy. You give something up, it's not kind of obvious you get anything in return. But in Buddhism, you renounce something lower to achieve something higher. So actually it's something very positive. It's not, which may not be fully reflected in the word renunciation. Any questions about this? Yeah, please, sir.
Sorry, I may repeat it.
Yeah.
It's the word nekamma in Pali. You mentioned that renunciation, I'm sure that's great. But does it give that etymology or something like that?
Nekamma is like the opposite of karma. Karma is sensuality, yes. Right? So it's nekamma, non-sensuality.
Non-sexuality.
Non-sensuality.
Sensuality.
Yeah.
So it doesn't give that, what shall I say, at least the inferential knowledge that it is to gain something that give up something lower.
Not really. It
Not
doesn't
really.
say that. You have to see it from
See
the context.
whole picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to carry on till 4:30. So just to let you know, so I'm going to keep on going. And of course, if you need to go, whatever, you're always very welcome to leave at any time. Just to be perfectly clear about that. So that is. These are the three aspects of bad ethics through the body. Yeah, this is what you see throughout the suttas. It's divided between body, speech, and mind, and this is kind of the body part of ethics. And very often in the suttas, you find that things are the way they are stated. It's usually in a certain structure to it. This is in descending orders. The most important thing is not to kill. Then comes the stealing, and then comes the sexual at the very bottom. This is the least important of these ethical aspects. Yeah, what is most destructive, so to speak, comes first, and the least destructive come at the bottom. So that is that, and yeah. Okay, so let's move on to speech. So here we have the first aspect of speech. They give up lying. They speak the truth and stick to the truth. They're honest and trustworthy and don't trick the world with their words. This pertains to their ethics. Yeah, so lying is bad. No surprise there. And you know that, because if you lie, you kind of feel a bit dodgy afterwards. And so you speak the truth. You stick to the truth, right? You're honest and trustworthy. So you will notice here that on the one hand you have the outright lying, but then there are many gray zones very often when we speak. Yeah, you may not be outrightly lying, but you may not be telling the full truth either. You may be somewhere grayish, kind of in the middle there. And you will see here that the ideal way of speaking is not just that you don't lie, but that you are really honest. Yeah, you are very forthcoming. Yeah, you're not kind of you say things as they are, and even if it kind of reflects badly on yourself, yeah, you kind of you feel maybe a bit shameful about something you have done. Okay, more important to be honest and truthful than to kind of cover up my bad deeds so I look good in society. Yeah, and this is one of those actually very, to me, very beautiful things, to actually admit our mistakes. It is okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes in this world. And when we admit our mistakes, other people usually feel relieved because they don't feel so bad then, right? Because they know we are all in this boat together. Everyone makes mistakes. So if we admit to not being perfect, if we admit that we are also liable to make mistakes, we're actually helping other people, in a sense, feel more at ease with themselves as well. We're not all acting in this world, pretending to be something that we are not. And that acting and pretending to be something you're not, actually I think overall has a detrimental impact on humanity. Yeah? So we are honest and trustworthy. Yeah, people know you don't trick the world with your words. People know that they can trust what you say. What comes out of your mouth is largely reliable and not really a problem. So again, there's this whole scale, yeah, from the kind of worst kind of lying, where you may have some really bad motives, hatred or greed, to the most pure kind of speech, where you are speaking the full truth out of compassion and understanding and all of these kind of things. The whole kind of gamut of ethical, from the worst ethics to the kind of best, brightest ethics. Now, one of the difficulties with one of the things I haven't really spoken about, which I should mention very briefly as well, about ethical conduct, is that very often people will ask the question, is this good or is it bad? Yeah, I did this, is it good or is it bad? Well, first of all, you can't really tell from the act whether something is good or bad. It has to do with motivation, yeah? So that's the act itself, is possible to tell whether it's good or bad. You can have some idea, but not the full idea. But the other very important point here is that an action is often kind of complex. So it's not as if it is fully good or fully bad. It's somewhere in between. It's like in the gray zone in between, neither fully black nor fully white, but somewhere in between. And very often we are stuck in life. We have to make choices that are not ideal. Yeah, we have to kind of either A or B doesn't look very good to me. Both of them are a bit dodgy, a bit bad, but I have to make some choice. And so you make the least bad alternative sometimes, yeah? Because actually very difficult sometimes to make choices. And that is what we should often aim for in our life, is the least bad, yeah? In other words, as bright as we possibly can. It is actually impossible to always make pure, bright, white Kamma, because the only bright, white Kamma you can make is when you come out of a jhana state. And how many people come out of jhanas all the time? It's not that common, right? So no one is going to make pure, white Kamma all the time, unless you are an arahant, of course, or someone who attains jhana at will. It's very rare to find that. And so we're all going to make this kind of grey Kamma, yeah, which is kind of somewhere in between. So what we should aim for, instead of aiming for always making good, what we call good Kamma, we should aim to make as good Kamma as we can. And then we should develop our mind in the good qualities, in the good motivations of compassion, of kindness, of renunciation, of wisdom. All of these good qualities, we should develop those, that in the future we can make even better Kamma, because we're coming from an even more pure place in the future. So we do the best we can now with the mind that we have. We do the best kind of possibilities. Then we purify our mind further. Through that purification, we can make even better Kamma in the future. So Kamma is quite complicated. And the Buddha talks about is in the suttas. He talks about a dark Kamma leading to dark results. And that's kind of really evil Kamma that takes you straight into the dodgy, bad realms. Or the really bright Kamma, which is like the Brahmaloka, is the kind of highest. And then he talks about dark and bright Kamma, leading to dark and bright results. And this is kind of the greyish Kamma, which is kind of more complex. And there's a last kind of Kamma, the neither dark nor bright Kamma, that leads to neither dark nor bright results. But that is for another time. So please tune in, listen, and we'll see what happens in the future. That is kind of the enlightenment Kamma, just to give you a preview. So this is the idea of lying. And again, remember that at the root of all of this is intention. There may be certain cases where lying might be acceptable if you're coming from compassion. Generally speaking, it's a dangerous thing, you should avoid it. But again, there may be some extreme situations where it may be acceptable. This is where you're coming from, is the most important thing. So now you have some idea why we have rules. The reason why, on the one hand, you can basically guide your whole life through these kind of basic ideas of morality. Look at your motivation. Where are you coming from? What is your intention? If you have a great clarity of mind, you can guide everything you do through that. But the problem is that sometimes in life we get confused. Sometimes we forget what is important, we forget what matters, and we kind of get really confused. Then it's very handy to have kind of 5 clear rules of what to do. Okay, don't lie. Okay, don't lie. Okay, or at least I can remember that much. My mind state, I don't really understand my mind state at the moment. It is a bit blurry, a bit uncertain. So forget about trying to understand my motivation. Let's just stick with not lying. A lot of the time, that is the right way, because it can be hard to really understand what is going on. And very commonly for human beings, there's going to be some delusion there which guides you in the wrong way and makes it difficult for you to understand what is happening here. So, yes. So anything about lying? Nayana?
Sorry, this is not about lying, but the actions, bodily actions. Any reason why Buddha left out the taking intoxicants at this stage?
This is for the monastic path, and we have quite clear rules about not drinking alcohol already. I think the reason is because, remember, this is about ethics, and drinking alcohol in itself is not ethically wrong. In itself, it's the consequence of drinking alcohol which is the real problem. And so because this is about ethics, it is not about kind of rules of living that support ethics, but it's about ethics itself. So that, I think, is the main reason. So if you look at the 5th precept, it always talks about alcohol that leads to heedlessness, right? And the heedlessness, of course, means that you don't really act appropriately anymore. But of course, alcohol in itself does have negative consequences as well. I mean, you get deluded, you have all of these kind of things that kind of distort the mind. In the long run, they can have very, very negative consequences. But they are more on the level of creating delusion and creating problems rather than actually being itself a negative actor. Yeah. Sure. Please.
I've seen it written that not to give up lying, but to give up wrong speech. And I always took that to include harmful speech, causing harm with your speech.
Yep.
Because, like giving away a secret, it might be true, but it's actually not right to give it away. And
Absolutely,
insults might be true, but they can be very hurtful. Making the most of somebody's failures, all that. Is that not covered here?
It is covered. We'll see, coming to it in a second, actually. It's coming up now, so just so thank you for the preview of what's coming. No, this is an insult, but it's true, so I'm going to tell you to your face. So I know what you mean there. Please, Adi, fire away.
Ajahn Brahmali, two things, Ajahn Brahmali.
Yeah.
First thing is on lying. After that, the previous one on sex, can I say something too? Yeah. The lying, as I see it, lying, two aspects, One, if you lie with intention to cheat or to harm or hurt people, that is bad, The other lying is like say for example, you're saying things, I can't attend your party, okay? We can say, I can't attend your party because I don't feel like going. That's too much, I think. I can't because, I've got my brother's, party going on, just to make it more subtle. I know it's still lying, but maybe the karma is less.
Absolutely.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. That was kind of what I was saying. Yeah, exactly. So it depends on your motivation and intention, exactly.
Yeah, the intention.
Yep.
It based on the intention.
Yep.
The other one, the prevalent on sex, okay? So sex is very powerful, okay? To tell people no sex, they'll go cuckoo. For monks, you're already maybe from previous life's condition, you can do that, okay? Yeah. So the thing is, the sexual part, this thing is, let them experience, sex is not all that great, First thing, there's a lot of STDs going on, sexual transmitted, okay? And then the attached, how they say, association with people brings, you're dealing with another person, that brings suffering too, And also the last part, the LUST, the last is not permanent, After a short while, it goes off too, So to get that little thrill, the orgasm, and then you have to go through a lot of problem too. So, but you can't tell the person, you let the person experience maybe the middle way and slowly cut down. What do you think?
Yes, usually it's good to be gradual. You can't, the idea in Buddhism is that your path should kind of gradually develop itself. It shouldn't be too forceful. And if you have to use force, it's usually counterproductive, and you're going to have a lot of suffering and problems as a consequence. So it should be quite natural. I agree with you. But remember that all of these things depend on your perceptions, and you can actually change your attitude to these things in part by perceiving the world differently. What is important to you will depend on your perceptions. So how you look at the world, how you look at people, all of these things will feed back into precisely this kind of things. And so but there's nothing wrong with sex. Sex is not considered immoral as such in Buddhism. Or if it is immoral, it's only tiny. It's better not to. Ideally, if you can have good deep meditation instead, it's better. It's considered a higher kind of morality. But sexuality is not immoral in Buddhism. And that's why one of the reasons I don't really like the word vulgar, because vulgar to me sounds like almost you're making it into something bad. And people have enough complexes in this area as they do. We don't need to add to that. But it's not really bad, and so don't I would say to people don't worry too much about these kind of things. Yes, we are trying to achieve something higher, but don't force it. Don't try. Don't use too much willpower, because it will be counterproductive.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we don't have all that much time left, because I don't want to carry on for too long. Is any kind of last questions for the few minutes? Let me just I'll give you a preview, Sue, because I think you know this already, but there's 4 kinds of wrong speech, and many of these other kinds will be covered. What you're talking about will be covered by these other kinds. So let me just show you what they are very briefly. So we have the speaking the truth, and we have giving up divisive speech, right? Divisive speech is where you kind of say something bad to someone, and then you tell this, about someone else, and they feel divided from each other because they hear negative things about each other. That's kind of divisive speech, and considered quite bad. It's a second thing after lying here. And then we come to the other one you were talking about more directly. I'm going to come back to this later on. It's harsh speech. Yeah, it's where you talk using harsh words and making people feel bad because of that. And then the last kind of wrong speech is, it says here, giving up talking nonsense. And the Pali word here is sampapalapa. It sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? Sampapalapa. It really means like frivolous. It doesn't really mean nonsense as such. It means like frivolous speech, meaningless speech, speeches which is kind of about all kind of irrelevant matters. Sampapalapa. Palapa means to speak, and sampa. It was funny because I mentioned this before, but it's kind of a nice little story. I'm actually going off to Indonesia on Wednesday, so this is kind of a preview for me, a reminder of Indonesia. And we're talking, there was some of this kind of big, what they call Dhamma talk show, they call them, yeah, and there's an audience there, and you're interviewed, and we're talking about wrong speech. And I say, oh yeah, it's called Sampapalapa, and everyone was laughing, yeah, because Sampa, in Indonesian is very heavily influenced by Sanskrit, lots of Sanskrit words. Sampa means rubbish. Yeah, so it was like the rubbish bin was over there. That was the Sampa bin, yeah, over there. The Sampapalapa is like rubbish talk, almost quite literally here. And so this is what this talking about giving up nonsense or frivolous speech or rubbish speech is about. So I think most of the things that you meant there are probably included in these things. And if they are not included in these things, because when you categorize things, some things are always going to be excluded from the categories. Anytime you're kind of doing something which feels a bit dodgy, don't do it. That's kind of the bottom line. Yeah. Okay, everyone, any last comments or questions before we call it a day? Yeah. Do we have anything? I have forgotten about people outside of the center. That's true. We usually bring that in as well. Completely forgotten about that. So, is there anyone from outside? Let's take the ones from outside first of all, Eddie. Yeah, because we're going to take too long. Yeah. Okay. 2 questions. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So here we are. So these are the 2 questions from outside. So the first one is, a monk told a lie and said it was for the practitioner's own good. The practitioner found out the truth after 20 years. What are your thoughts, Ajahn? Thank you. Yeah, this is just like making an excuse for your lying, yeah? I'm lying for your own good, and it's not kind of the right way of doing things. I mean, sometimes there may be a reason for lying. You know, if someone really is going to get hurt if you tell the truth, then you don't have to tell the truth. You don't really have to lie either. You can just say, this is not the right time to talk about this, or whatever. I mean, you don't always, usually you don't have to lie. Maybe in some extreme situations you have, but it's very, very rare. So I would say that if the monk did this, maybe he had some fairly good reasons, so it wasn't so bad, but it sounds to me like he probably shouldn't have done it. Okay, next one. Is pure intention which leads to good ethical behavior necessarily free of ego? I think to be really, really pure, it should probably be free of ego. Yeah, as long as there is an ego there will be a degree of self-interest, and it will not be a really pure act. So you're doing it for the benefit of someone else, if you fully do it for the benefit of someone else, the ego should really be gone, because the ego will say, okay, it is for me, I'm doing it also for myself or whatever. So I think the less ego there is, the more pure the action is going to be. Sometimes you hear people say things like, well, am I really being fully generous? When I give something, I know it is going to be good for me as well. So it's isn't it kind of greedy because I know it's going to be good for me? That is the misunderstanding of the idea of greed. The idea of greed is like a feeling. You feel, this is for me. It's like it's this kind of limited feeling. But if you're truly generous to someone, you don't have that kind of greed there anymore. That's completely gone from your mind. You may know that it is good for you, but that knowledge is very different from greed. It's two very different things. Knowledge is one thing. Another thing is the feeling of, this is for me, and a greedy kind of accumulation of something. So it is not selfish to act out of generosity, act with kindness, even if you know it is good for yourself. Because selfishness is a particular kind of feeling, a particular kind of limitation of the mind. All right, everyone. So nice to see you all there. And let us just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha to finish off.